a long time, I held in my emotions. I was afraid to fully express them. I was afraid that nobody would look at my work of art and they would instead look at me as the artist, as the person. And I didn't want them to look at me. I wanted them to look at my artwork. And so for a long time, I held in that emotion until I decided to finally take a risk. And was it easy? Yes. My name is Nancy Rourke. I don't have a sign name. I'm from Denver, Colorado. Originally from San Diego, California. Born and grew up in San Diego. I was born deaf. My parents didn't know I was deaf until I was 6. A doctor said that I had a learning disability and that I had a speech problem. But my parents didn't think that was true. Unfortunately, they didn't find out I was deaf until I was 6, which was late. The only way I communicated was through writing. I loved drawing and art. And then in high school, I decided that I wanted to be an artist. My parents noted that I had a lot of talent and encouraged me. They encouraged me to enter art contests and shows. And then I came to NTID and RIT to study art, specifically graphic design and painting. I was here for 2 years. I received my MFA from RIT, and that was in 1986. When I was young, I started to get involved with art when I was 6 or 7 years old. I started painting rocks and worked my way up to painting on canvas. And I became involved in art fairs and contests. I did that more and more often. My parents really encouraged me. It was great. And that is what led me into art. From my early work, well, I really started in oils. I didn't do much with watercolors. And I didn't do a lot of drawing, but mostly oil painting. And I would say I started that when I was about 10 years old. Most of my art really at that time was scenery. It was what you would call landscapes, that kind of thing. I utilized pastels in my work, but now my attitude and perspective has completely changed on my work. I use a completely different color palette, utilizing more bold and intense colors. Now, at that time, I was in college, and I just started my first deaf artist show, which was in the National Gallery of Arts in Washington, D.C. And that was, I would say, 1978. After I graduated from college, NTID contacted me and invited me to be one of 12 deaf artists to go to California. We were in Los Angeles, California. And it was called Heart, Eyes, and Hands. That was in 1986. After that, I stopped painting and redirected my efforts into graphic design. And in the back of my mind, I thought that, it was time for me to get back into painting. Now, this is after 16 years of not having been painting for so long. So I decided to join a local art organization. It was an artist league. And I heard that this particular organization was having an art contest for regional artists. So I decided to submit one of my paintings, and it won second place, if you can imagine that. I was shocked. And that award led me back into my love for painting. I have two specific art movements that influenced my style. One is from the early 1900s. It's called Fauvism. And the founder of Audism is Henri Matisse. He utilized a lot of bold and bright colors within his work. He wasn't afraid to expose people and society. For example, he used the green pigment for faces and red pigment for hair color. I really liked that approach. His work is beautiful. The second movement that I like is more contemporary. Started in the 70s. The artist's name that I'm thinking of is Jean-Michel Basquiat. His work is similar to Henri Matisse. He utilizes a lot of reds and blues and black. And his art incorporates a message. He uses a lot of text in his art, and his art often expressed his rage and frustration. His art was mostly about his black culture. And there's a second artist who is still alive today. His name is Matt Ciso. He lives in Washington, D.C. He's considered an outsider because he's self-taught. He lost his arm when he was a young boy from an airplane propeller. And he expresses a lot of his frustration and a lot of his anger. And he has used that in his work and in his paintings. And that has influenced me, thinking about myself as a deaf woman and the anger and frustration I've had in expressing that through my paintings, using a lot of reds and yellows and blues and black and white as well. I do have a studio, and I have 4 different sized easels set up at the same time. And sometimes I paint 4 paintings in one day. I will move between the easels. Sometimes I'll paint on the larger size canvas and then move over to the smaller size canvas and take a break and move over to another size canvas and then move back and forth among the canvases. It's really a crazy day. It gets very messy. I'm usually covered in paint from head to toe. Of course, I wear old clothes when I'm painting that I don't care about. And I just get engrossed in my work and very focused on what I'm doing. I use primary colors, the reds, the yellows, the blues. I do that because I feel they're the most inspiring and uplifting colors. I call that deaf art. I see them as very inspiring, and when people look at them and they look at the paintings, they look different. It's like a wake-up call. I also use black and white and blend them to influence the tones. Rarely I will incorporate green, and I tend not to use the secondary colors of purple and orange. Green I'll use once in a while. And if I add blue with the green, it's more acceptable to me. When I was thinking about my journey through deafhood, I decided to submit a proposal to the Puffin Foundation. They provide grants to artists and art projects, and so I decided to write up my deafhood journey and submit it as a proposal for one of their projects. I did that and sent that to the foundation, and I finally heard back from them. It was about a year later, and they accepted my proposal. And that's how I really got involved in deafhood. I studied more about painting and deaf politics, deaf history, and deaf culture. I also used a lot of my anger and frustration within my work, my anger and frustration as a deaf person. But at the same time, I wanted to be able to show my appreciation to the deaf community so that other deaf people could see our shared experience in my work. I had a solo show in Denver, and everything within that show was about deafhood and deaf politics. And only hearing people came to the show. They were fascinated to see the variety of works of arts that I had on display, and they were asking me why I did this and why I did that. They were very curious, and I educated them. I really enjoyed talking about my work and explaining why I made the choices I made and where they came from. It was an amazing experience for them. In my paintings, when I express myself as a deaf person, I'm not angry because I'm deaf. I'm quite proud to be a deaf woman. I'm angry because of the oppression that I have experienced. It's been a frustrating experience. People who aren't deaf don't understand what I've been through. There's a lot of anger in that. And I produced a lot of disturbing art works as a result of that anger. After receiving the Puffin Grant project, when I was working on the deafhood painting project, I purchased a book called Understanding Deaf Culture: In Search of Deafhood by Dr. Patty Ladd. It was a fascinating book. And as I read it, I decided to borrow many of the ideas and incorporate them into my paintings. That book really had a tremendous impact on me. The word deafhood, as I define it, is a way a deaf person identifies him or herself. How would that deaf person describe him or herself? Who he or she is? Where he or she comes from? Within the deaf community, within the deaf culture, within the deaf way of life. I want to be able to make symbols, many, many small symbols, and put them within my paintings. I want to incorporate a message within the paintings, and I really haven't developed that yet, but that is my goal. For example, in one of my paintings, it was one of my pieces of disturbing art, and it's called Deaf Mute. The mouth of the individual is scribbled out in paint, and the person's hands are over his ears, showing that he's deaf and he can't speak. I would like to incorporate a symbol in that work of art. That's my next project. I learned about Devia when I was at Deaf Way. I just learned a little bit about it from the creators of Devia, and that's all. After that, I really didn't think about deaf art until much later, when I started painting again. And once I got involved with painting, I looked at it and I call that deaf art. It involves deaf culture, it involves deafhood, oppression, Audism. But I didn't realize and pay attention to the link to Devia in my work. When I was an RIT art student, no one even mentioned the concept of using deaf themes within a painting. They didn't think about what you've gone through, the frustrations that you've seen, or your experience as a deaf person. That just came from me. My advice for future deaf artists is that you really need to become a prolific artist. You need to continue to produce works of art. The more you do, the more painting you do, that's how you'll achieve your success. Also, you need to be involved in the business side of things. You might want to go to some workshops and learn about the law and how to operate your own business if you want to do that. I did that with my business. I'd advise them to take a few technical classes as well. For example, take a computer class and learn how to set up your own website. Also, you need to print business cards and contact art galleries. You need to find an art representative. And you need to participate in different art organizations. All of those are really important as an artist. Most of my art really at that time was scenery. It was what you would call landscapes, that kind of thing. This was from the book Understanding Deaf Culture in Search of Deafhood by Dr. Patty Ladd. When I read that book, I decided to borrow that concept and put it into one of my paintings. And here you see the Deaf Way. They're using a round table. The deaf people are seated at the table with a light overhead in the center so everyone can see each other easily. They're having a conversation about deaf culture. The book on the table displays the concepts that I learned from Patty Ladd's book. He talked about subalterns, elites, and rebels. Some people within the community tend to exhibit these features, and the people in the painting are all doing that. The person on the far left is signing, "Really? Really?" The next person to his left is signing, "That's incredible." The woman in the center with the blue hair is signing, "Finally." The next person isn't saying anything. The next person is signing how horrible that is. The woman on the far right with the red hair is signing yes, and the person who's back to us is signing cooperate. Underneath the table is a deaf dog. You can see that the deaf dog, it says, I am deaf. And up here is a picture of Laurent Clerc. I have one separate work of art of Laurent Clerc that I did, and he is in this work of art. I used yellows and blues and reds with black and white. I tried to balance the colors throughout the painting. I wanted the focal point of the painting to come right here into the center of the table. Yes, I do think there is some cubism here. Picasso was a slight influence on me. This was inspired from the ABC cards that you would see a long time ago. There would be deaf peddlers in public areas that would peddle these cards, and at the end of the card they always showed the sign for and. You don't see that in this day and age. So I used a little bit of deaf history and put it into this piece of work. When I painted this, I used a lot of masking tape. I'd put the tape on the canvas, and then it would help me to brush the specific squares for each of the hand shapes. So I did that throughout the canvas. Even though it was wet, I used the masking tape. And there was a lot of tape on the canvas. I wanted to balance the colors that I chose, so I chose contrasting colors. You'll see here I've got the blue with the red, which are contrasting colors, and the black. And the hand shapes are sketches of my own hand. I made each of the hand shapes and I drew them, I sketched them. I added the arrows that you can see in this letter Z, and for the signed and for the J, because you would see those arrows on the ABC cards. And this was inspired by Matisse's work called The Dance. This is about deafhood, meaning that deaf people are diverse, and it doesn't matter what background you come from, whether you're wearing a cochlear implant or you're oral or you use ASL in your daily life. We're all deaf regardless of who we are, and we're united in that way. And you can see that the people are holding each other with the hand shapes to be connected, and it infers the sign for unity. This one, I used green color. As I said, I use it rarely. But in this specific case, it's more of a blue-green, and it's showing grass, so it's all right that I used green in this painting. This is called Friends in Deafhood. And the people are holding hands with the hand shape for friend. So they're showing that they're friends. Let's be friends. Let's celebrate our friendship and our deafhood. And this was also inspired by Matisse's work, The Dance. And this is from my own experience when I was a young girl. I had to learn how to listen and how to speak. I was given a new hearing aid at the time. The person in yellow is the audiologist. And I tried to make this look ironic. Often audiologists would say airplane and baseball and hot dog, and that's what the three figures in the background are doing. the audiologist would use the same word again and again and again, year after year. It almost felt, well, it was distasteful. It was really rather insulting. I didn't understand why they used the same 3 words repeatedly over the years. So I decided to make the painting more ironic. And you'll see in the background are images of the sound booths that we used to sit in with the audiologist. Looks like a pegboard and colored in gray. So this just brought back memories. Honestly, it was a nightmare for me. This painting, Say the Word. There was another deaf artist who made a painting using the similar concept and entitled it Say the Word, and I had no idea of this other painting. I just happened to paint this from my own experience. This one is from my own experience. This is really an example of Audism. I felt forced that I had to wear a hearing aid, and at that time the hearing aid was connected with a wire and put in a pocket on our shirt. And the kids at school would make fun of me, and they would mock me. They saw the wire to my hearing aid, and they would flick it with their finger and pull the hearing aid off my ear. It was a very unpleasant experience, and if you look at the image of the person signing deaf, and as a deaf person I would prefer to sign, but I was forced to wear a hearing aid. I entitled this work, I Am Deaf. This painting is something that recently happened, and from what I learned from California, Bill AB 2072, after that was turned down, they voted and they talked about babies who are hearing. It would be a good idea for them to learn sign language for fun, whereas babies who were deaf were forced to learn spoken English, forced to have cochlear implants, forced to practice the English speech sounds with their hands. So on the bottom you see the deaf baby, and on the top you see the hearing baby signing, and the deaf baby being forced to use English. It's ironic. This one is from my own experience, and this was from the time when I was a graphic designer working for a company. The people in color are my coworkers, and this is an example of a social event, a party, where everybody's chatting and enjoying themselves, but I'm feeling left out. I'm in black and white, which shows that I'm not happy, and I'm feeling sad. The figures in colors, I would ask them, well, what did this person say, or what did that person say? And you'll see them holding up their finger. They're saying, wait a minute, we'll tell you later. The figures in colors show that they're happy and they're engaged and involved, whereas the figure in black and white representing myself shows that I'm not.